So now after those top three, and those might be more obvious, but you know what? That's fine. Now we get into some guys that like could be first rounders. I think projected more in that second half of the first round, and we'll see how it all plays out. This next one, though, I would say he falls through the cracks a little bit, in part because of where he played. And this is not a knock on Illinois. It's just that they didn't get a lot of love this last season. They did the season before that, if you remember. They made that run, almost won their division, almost beat Michigan at the end of the year. They had a bunch of draft picks off of that defense. It was one of the best defenses in the country. Their coordinator, Ryan Walters, left. He's the head coach at Purdue. JerZhan Newton has to stay, and that's my man at 4, the defensive tackle for Illinois, JerZhan Newton. JerZhan Newton is a disruptive player in the middle of the field, and those don't come along often. He can rush the quarterback, be productive in the pass game, and he's also excellent stopping the run. He's quick in the interior, which you don't always see, and I just think people don't quite recognize that because of where he played. If this guy played at one of the Blue Bloods last year, we'd all be raving about him. And trust me, scouts know about JerZhan Newton. His speed and athleticism in the interior remind me of a lot of, I would categorize him as a bit undersized, disruptive players. I'm not going to compare him to Aaron Donald, but that's the mold, okay, of a guy that can sit in the interior and do those types of things. It's very difficult to block him. Penn State could not block him the game I covered him. And his teammates and coaches rave about him. When I would cover teams in the Big Ten, I always asked them about players around the conference. And almost every offensive coach would bring up, man, we couldn't block JerZhan Newton. And I'm like, well, you know what? At some point, you call a spade, and you say, that guy is a football playing Jesse. And that's exactly what JerZhan Newton is. Everybody that I played college football with who listened to this is now going to throw something at their radio or computer or whatever, wherever they're listening to this, because that's a term that our coaches used to use, and we'd all roll our eyes, and they're just like, oh, you know what? That's just a football playing Jesse. But it's correct. The guy just put him in football pads and put him out there, and he's going to be really good. That's JerZhan Newton. All right, number 5, another defensive tackle. I think he's probably going to be in the first round, but we'll see. I mean, the first round gets so nutty because you get runs on positions, and then it's a lot of need, and then we could get trades back into that back end or half of the first round. But this is a guy that I really, really like. Byron Murphy from Texas. Byron Murphy was, in a lot of ways, the reason why Texas was back where they were at. Everybody pays attention to the quarterback. So Quinn Ewers gets a lot of love. And obviously, Bijan got a lot of love last year. And then Jonathan Brooks this year, Xavier Worthy this year, Adonai Mitchell this year. Sark gets a lot of, they had some great players on offense. But the reason Texas was back and more consistent was that they played more consistent football on the defensive side, and more specifically at the line of scrimmage. And that's where Byron Murphy comes in. This guy was a man amongst boys this year in college football. Virtually unblockable. Washington couldn't block him, by the way. Penix just had an unbelievable game in that national semifinal. He was manipulating the pocket and getting away from the rush, but T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, they were trying to beat Washington single-handedly. And again, in a lot of ways, we can talk about all those fancy things that Texas has, and that's the reason why they got back to the playoff and are back on the upper echelon of college football. But really, in reality, it was Byron Murphy, it was T'Vondre Sweat, and it was their ability to play consistently at the line of scrimmage on defense. And Murphy is one of those guys. I see these coaches in the NFL, and in particular when we see the copycat nature of football, both levels, by the way, college and the NFL. And a lot of people are going to be trying to copy what Baltimore does or what Michigan does. Guess what? Same defense. I've spent so much time around these coordinators of each of those units, and I can tell you, both with Mike McDonald, who's now the head coach in Seattle, and Jesse Minter, who's now the defensive coordinator for the Chargers, and with the Ravens, they start with building a run wall. They want to establish depth and a wall on the interior of their defensive line with big, strong tackles, and that's exactly what Murphy is. And so in a copycat nature, when more teams are going to be looking at that and trying to implement that strategy and philosophy, Murphy is a perfect pick. And if he gets picked late in the first round, I think it's a really good one, and I think he's going to be a really solid player in the National Football League. All right, we've got 5 more here. Guys that, again, we are planting flags on players in this draft that this show believes in, that I believe in, that I think that they're just going to be really good pros. And now we get into those guys that I got one more that may sneak into the first round, but in all likelihood is probably going to be an early second round player. Wide receiver from Oregon, Troy Franklin. I really like Troy Franklin a lot. And he's getting, I don't know about lost, but it's easy, I think, to put other wide receivers ahead of him. So you can make a quick top 5 list and not include Troy Franklin. It's very easy to get to 6 or 7 or 8 at wide receiver. And then you're like, oh yeah, and Troy Franklin's pretty good. But the difference is that he's not just pretty good. He is an elite pass catcher on the outside. He's a great route runner. He's got fantastic hands, great worker, and he's athletic, and he can run, and he can make contested catches. This wide receiver class is so deep, and now all of a sudden, you're going to have an absolute gem sneak, and it might be early in the first round, or second round. It might be late in the first round. But he's the type of guy that we're going to look up, and we're going to be like, oh man, how come we didn't see this? Well, part of the problem is that there's a lot of good ones. Marvin Harrison, he's generational. You got Brian Thomas and Keon Coleman and Malik Neighbors, and you got all these guys, and it's easy to overlook Troy Franklin. We're not going to overlook him because Troy Franklin does what those guys want him to do. He gets open, he catches the football. He ran a 4.41 at 6'2". Like, come on now. There's a spot for this guy, and he's going to be really, really good. So Troy Franklin at number 6. Thank you for watching the Joel Klatt Show YouTube channel. And if you liked this clip, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel, and you can stay up to date on all of my college football coverage.